Hello and welcome back to Morning Express. We are glad you're watching. My name is Sophia Wanuna. It is time for State of the Nation and also State of the Economy, and also that corruption that people have been talking about on social media. It's been making headlines as well and conversations across the board. And my guest this morning will seek to break it down as to what got us here, what needs to happen, especially going forward, more of seeking solutions in as far as that debate is concerned. And in studio on my immediate left is Karidhi Murimi. He's an economic commentator. Also with us is Edwin Sifuna, who is a lawyer. Munjiri Wambogo is a political commentator. And last but not least is Dr. Paul Nyangasi, who is a consultant with the Coalition of Reforms and Democracy. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us, and a good morning to you all. Let's begin with you, Dr. Nyangasi, because last year, Eurobond successful, oversubscribed, and people thought things are looking up. Now we're talking about, imminent tax hikes, high interest rates, increased government borrowing. According to you, from where you sit, what got us here?
Oh, this is it's a very long story of policy mismanagement. They mismanaged the whole process, from policy formulation to policy management and to policy implementation. The priority setting was wrong, the project selection was wrong, the debt management strategy was wrong. It's such a compounded problem that it is difficult to identify one place.
Yeah, so you're saying generally it's management, poor management, in Treasury, because a lot of these decisions are made perhaps there?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, what happened was the government came into power in 2013, and it had this ambitious manifesto where they wanted to implement all these mega projects, what David D likes to call the major project disease. And they decided to implement all these projects at the same time. The problem was that these projects were too expensive. And if you go down through the list of the projects that they selected, our economy simply couldn't afford that all at the same time at the right time. So it's very poor priority setting with the Jubilee government. Yeah.
All right. Karidhi, I'll bring this to you. He says poor management, poor prioritization, wanting to do too much at the same time. Do you agree with that?
I think the key question Kenyans need to kind of wake up to the truth is we have a new constitution. What did 349 MPs do? Because under Chapter 12 of the Constitution on Public Finance, all these things, including Eurobond, increasing the borrowing limit, were done by MPs. So if we have the wrong quality MPs, then we should be waking up to the truth. What I'm saying in short is that the registrators are wrong in pretending that they are the ones now shouting. We need to revisit the equation under the public participation philosophy. What is not working correctly? Why are Kenyans not being made to understand things before things are done? All right,
and we'll get to that in terms of the role of the parliament. But from where you sit, what went wrong? Is it poor management? Is it also prioritization by government? We have SGR, we have Galana, we have energy, some of those key flagship programs by the government. Are they wanting to do too much at the same time, and Kenya can't just absorb that?
The issue is not actually what is going wrong or not went wrong. The issue is that we have a Vision 2030. We have what we call a 5-year medium-term plan, which is implemented by government. What the Uhuru government is doing is basically what coalition government had endorsed. So in April 2013, it's not like Uhuru woke up to say, I want to do a standard gauge review. The standard gauge review is actually a Raila item when he was the Minister for Roads. It was brought out by KEPSA demand. So we need to start understanding the fundamentals behind some of these things.
Okay.
Now, whether they were overpriced, that's a separate debate. Yes.
All right. I'll hear from you, Edwin. What do you think about when he says Parliament has let us down, that all of this was extended because they allowed for it to happen, and now we're hearing most of the politicians coming out to say things are wrong?
Well, I agree with him to that extent that Parliament has failed, because our MPs have not appreciated that they're not part of the executive. I got extremely offended recently when CSO Teach was testified to some parliamentary committee, and he was telling them even these amendments to the Public Finance Management Act that enabled or permitted the Eurobond proceeds to be deposited in an account other than the consolidated fund was passed by those very MPs. But it was dishonesty, because our MPs are not keen. Whenever something is a government proposal, most of them are only keen to please the executive. They never, go through whatever amendments are being proposed with an eye on the future and asking questions why this is happening. So this started with the dishonesty of the executive, of course, by bringing those amendments to Parliament, a Parliament they know would not bother to check because it is a Jubilee Parliament, and they passed those amendments without regard to what it is the executive was trying to do. We have a Parliament that gives Uhuru and the executive whatever it is that they want. They don't want to offend him.
Munjiri is smiling.
I didn't know we have a Jubilee Parliament. I
Isn't it heavy on Jubilee side?
Actually, yes. My understanding is that that ODM has a really large portion of members of Parliament in this particular Parliament, and they are pretty well represented in every committee that sits, including the budget and accounts and the budgetary committee, which would be one of the committees that looks at some of the things that Edwin is talking about. But then I also think we're getting carried away by the hype and the conversations, especially that are coming from the opposition. I think it's important for us to understand one thing. It is in the opposition's best interests to make everything that the government tries to do look like it is failing, whether it is failing or not. That is their business.
In this case, is it failing?
First, that's now what I'm talking about, the context. Remember, the Eurobond was actually a 2014-2015, it was coming into the 2014-2015 budget cycle. We are in the 2015-2016 budget cycle as we speak right now. When the Eurobond came, one of the things that we were supposed to do was to actually reduce the interest rates. If anybody has gone back to the 2014-2015 period of our country, interest rates actually went down. That's a fact. So, and then we also have this thing, and I have heard the leader of the opposition keep talking about the way we got 174 billion shillings, which is actually a lot of money. But then put it in the context of the fact that we run a 2.1 trillion budget, and you realize that 174 billion shillings is approximately 10% of our budget, meaning that when you put that money into our budget, it actually has a 10% impact on the kind of stuff that we do as a country. Now, these are the things that nobody is saying, that we have been told that 174 billion shillings was supposed to do humongous things that we should have seen.
No, it was for specific.
No. But the loan was not specific. Even that. No, that's another point where these guys are lying to us, because even the prospectus of that sovereign bond, when it was being raised, included support for general budgetary support. It is one of the things that that Eurobond was supposed to come and do. What does general budgetary support mean? It means part of the money was actually supposed to come in and support ongoing budgets that the government had actually established for the 2014-2015 year. None of these guys are going to tell you that. They're going to keep asking you, this Eurobond was supposed to come and make humongous projects. Where are they? Forgetting that we have a government that runs a 2.2 trillion, call it a 2 trillion budget every year and keeps growing. That now we're having another conversation about the $600 billion budget loan that has come in. To them, we're not supposed to be growing our expenditure. We're not supposed to be getting money to grow our expenditure. As a political commentator, and I could be coming from different perspectives with this gentleman, what I am seeing is a deliberate, concerted effort to have a situation where whatever the government does in terms of financial growth, in terms of financial expansion, is undermined by a conversation like we're hearing right now. Nobody has put context to the Eurobond. The Eurobond came to Kenya for the 2014-2015 budget cycle. And what it was supposed to do,
you're saying it achieved.
It did.
No. Let's go to Dr. Nyangasi, then we'll come back to you.
We have to deal with the assertions he has made, because these are very substantial false allegations. Because when we went for the Eurobond, that was not the reasoning they gave. They told us it was to reduce local interest rates and to introduce Kenya into the international debt and foreign financial instruments, and to
all of which
to be calm and to finance mega projects. And they did not talk about budget support, because there are cheaper facilities out there for budget support. They put it out there as this sophisticated thing that Kenya must absorb, and we're moving forward because we are now digital and we're doing fancy things outside there. But the implementation now is where to
his point, did it do what it was meant to do then?
Of course it wasn't. It didn't do what it was meant to do then.
Didn't interest rates go down?
No, the interest rate didn't go down. The problem is, if you look at
September, October, November,
From
December.
where to where?
From last year, interest went down.
From
interest
what
rates
to
went
what?
down.
let me tell you why it's that. Let me make an argument to that. Let me tell you why that cannot be true.
Right.
Because in July is when we received the first batch of the money, and in November is when we received the second. In November is when we received. Bro, go check out the documents. Is when we received the second.
We need documentation.
Yes.
Is when we received the second batch of the money. So, and over a period of almost a year, it sat in account in New York. So how can it reduce? How can it? Can I make my argument?
I think Munjiri
Maybe
has. I just need to point.
How can it reduce interest rates in Kenya when it's sitting in an account in JP Morgan in New York?
Yeah, let me just comment on one thing. You see, when this money was being borrowed, we were given specifics of what it's supposed to do. Upon receipt of money, now we are being given amorphous explanations and hiding under very amorphous descriptions like budgetary support. If you ask Ngunjiri, he knows the exact amount of money that was borrowed. Give us a list. Tell me 10 million shillings went to this, 10 million shillings went to this. That is what the Coalition for Reforms and Democracy has asked.
Put out an explanation.
They have requested, and it is in public knowledge that over 45 billion shillings of that money cannot be pointed to any specific project or use that it was put. And that is what we are saying. We are not saying let's not borrow, because we understand that to develop and to finance some of the progress that we want to see, we need that borrowing. But when you are asked, you are given 10 billion shillings, show us where the money went. Please don't give us stories. Give us an itemized list saying 10 billion went to KTN, 10 billion went to Standard Group. That is what we want to hear. It's an example.
Karidi, let me ask, what do you think Kenyans were misled on the Eurobond in terms of what that money would be used for?
I think one of the major errors we are having without our knowledge is making noise. The Auditor General has already audited the Eurobond. Okay, and I've talked to MPs, to be honest with you. I've told them they are being dishonest to Kenyans. The audit report on the Eurobond is sitting with the Public Accounts Committee, which is a clean report. What Rotich reproduced the other day in the diaries is part of that appendix which parliaments have. My appeal is within Article 211, where MPs are required to ask more information on any loan or any guarantee. And the Constitution says within 7 days, CS Ministry of Finance will submit that report to Parliament. What I'm asking MPs is, can you demand and then let Kenyans know the truth? Because we need to move from making noise to facts. Because these figures are not hidden figures. Any account the money went through is not a secret account. The accounts which can be submitted to Kenyans for Kenyans to see. Now, where do Kenyans come in? Kenyans come in because we created a constitution which allows, in matters of public finance, the public to be told everything. So I'm not saying what everybody is asking is wrong, but I'm saying let's also not go into noise making. Let's insist the house that we pay money, we pay them a salary to exactly give us information. All MPs sitting in a Public Accounts Committee, the chair is a court person. But that to me is neither here nor there. The issue is the 349 MPs, each of those MPs sit in a constituency. Let every MP tell me, in my constituency, this is what I know of the Eurobond.
All right, you have something to say.
I'm glad Mr. Karimi has actually made the point that the Eurobond expenditure was audited. That report has been given. We keep hearing these conversations we're hearing on this table about the way that money didn't go where it was supposed to go. The person who should actually have told us that is the auditor, the auditor and controller of budget.
Yes.
And the ones who should have told us that, they haven't said that. They've actually wrapped up that particular audit of the Eurobond expenditure, and they haven't told us that. So when I keep hearing noises coming from other quarters saying that Eurobond wasn't spent the way it was supposed to be spent, I have to call those political noises. Number two, we had a prospectus. The CS actually presented that prospectus to Parliamentary Accounts Committee when he was summoned recently. And it had general budgetary support. A prospectus was given before we raised the Eurobond. This is not a prospectus that came after. This is part of what was used to raise that Eurobond. It was a document that was available before the Eurobond was raised. So for guys to come back now and start arguing that the fact that we're talking about a general budgetary support is something that they've come up with now, as an amorphous thing, it's pure dishonesty.
So Nyangasi, that the institutions put in place by Kenyans have no problem, pretty much cleared this, and it has taken its due process. So what is all this?
I think there are two scenarios here.
Yeah.
We are questioning the accountability, and we're questioning the judgment surrounding the whole going to foreign markets to get a Eurobond. And what we are saying is that it's good to appreciate that we're two distinct coalitions with two different visions for governing this country. And we have articulated ours. And what we say is that if you wanted to do budget support, there are cheaper facilities out there. The IMF gives them, the World Bank gives them, the International Finance Corporation, they're there. The African Development Bank does that.
So you've shifted it, so they did not mislead Kenyans, it's just that they would have chosen a cheaper option. That's what now you're saying.
No, but that is deliberately misleading, because last year when they said that we're going to international markets and we're going to get, we're going to raise all this financing from international markets, they did not talk about budget support, because we would have made that argument then.
All right.
Yeah.
I think it's important, you know, when we deal with government talks through written things.
Yes.
Government doesn't talk verbally. The actual sovereign board, if you read the medium-term plan 1, the first 5 years of the Vision 2030, between the coalition government, the word borrowing foreign was agreed. And if you remember, it was a timing issue. That's how it was postponed. So the Uhuru government is implementing not necessarily what they have agreed, but a medium-term plan part. Now, Kenyans need to understand, in the theory of economics, what we call the macroeconomic management principles, the agreements with the World Bank, IMF, include submitting how you want to do your things. The foreign board is part of that agreement with IMF. Okay, the IMF is not that they were not aware. The other thing Kenyans need to understand is that the dollar, unfortunately, got a pressure from the US market. So the US, as an external factor, caused our dollar to increase. Then we had insecurity, which reduced inflows through tourism, through exports and all that.
Yeah.
Now, officially, the position is this, because you need to understand from where the Kibaki government, the coalition, and then the Uhuru, where they were coming from. The actual position is this. When you have interest rate and exchange rate, as a policy thinker, you have two things to think through. If you allow the exchange rate to go way high, exchange rate affects more the poor than the interest rate. The exchange rate, because you buy goods from outside, and if those goods are bought when the shilling is too high, the ordinary bread, mandasis and all that, the oil, you know, all those things are the ones which will go up. So what the policymaker does is he thinks two things. He thinks, do I allow exchange rate to go away, or do I allow interest rate? The Uhuru government has chosen the interest rate. The Kibaki government chose to allow the two to talk together, so they stagnated the economy, and the liquidity in the banking system increased. So what we indirectly are doing, in a very basic language, is we are increasing interest rate to suck out the money in the economy. The sucking out of the money in the economy makes that foreigner with a dollar to bring his dollar to Kenya. Okay? Now, if you look at the policy option on the Eurobond, the question which I'm happy the opposition is raising, which is a good question, if you ignore where the money was put, should we have paid 5 or 6% on a dollar, when in US the dollar is getting maybe less than 4%, maybe less than 3%? That to me is a relevant question. But that question sits on the Budget Committee of Parliament, because within the spirit of Chapter 12, Parliament was supposed to scrutinize the policy statement. Remember, we give Parliament the policy statement as executive in April, so that they have 2 months to debate that policy statement and come back to Kenya. Now, what is the central bank doing? What Joroge is now doing is saying, hold on, let me slow down the interest rate. Now, to slow down the interest rate, he has allowed an option of bring more dollars through syndicated loan. So this 600 million of last week made the government not buy 70 billion worth of treasury bills. By not buying, the banks are being given an indicator that now you need to ask for a lesser rate, because the government has another option from foreign syndicated. So all these are policy options. Now, are they right? This is the discussion we should be discussing. But to be honest, the questions are not the wrong questions. It's only that we need to remove the political part of it and make it a Kenyan issue, and then go through in detail the analysis. Now, who is making noise on interest rate? All people with mortgages, fortunately, have access to the media. So the media, of course, picks the noise from what we call the 30,000 mortgage Kenyans. But the balance of the Kenyans, the ordinary Kenyan selling sugar or eating whatever they are doing out there, their issues are yet to be discussed. Which is now, 1 minute, which is the other side, which is now the misuse of public funds, which is a separate debate.
Okay.
You know, it is a bit difficult to follow all the policy things that you talk about, but when you come to regular mwananchi issues, we're able to relate with you, and we tell you, first of all, you're very wrong. It is not only the mortgage people who feel interest rates. There are people who borrow money on M-Pesa for 10,000 shillings, 5,000 shillings to buy stock for goods to sell at the market. Those rates have also gone up. So it is not an issue for the middle class.
But their prices have gone up.
I am telling you that the M-Pesa M-Shwari loan that people take on their phones for 10,000, 2,000 shillings has also been increased.
Yeah,
the rate has been increased. What do you mean they have no problem?
No, they are commodities.
What do you mean they have no problem? They are paying a higher rate. They are paying a higher rate.
Cost of living has gone down
That's
over 12 months.
What do you mean?
Yes.
Where do these people live?
It has.
Where do these
Remember the
people
borrowing
live?
we are talking about, let's be honest. The moving of goods from Mombasa port has slowed down. The number of days is taking.
Your Mama Mboga does not move goods from
I've
Mombasa.
talked to them.
Which Mama Mboga?
All right.
A container.
Let me help.
What I wanted to say.
They
What I
sell
wanted
me
to say.
super. They come through a container.
All right, sir.
What I wanted to
Let's
to
have
say
facts
is this.
talking.
Yes.
Yes, it's
All
okay.
right.
It's okay.
Edwin.
It's okay.
Maybe.
What about come or
Okay, can I say something?
All right, let him
You
speak.
said let us not make noise.
Yes.
Yet you are standing here making noise.
All right,
Okay,
Edwin.
what should happen is this. Whenever somebody sends an issue to Parliament, that is somebody who wants to kill the debate. You should remember that it is not only through Parliament that things get done in this country. We as citizens of this country also have a responsibility of our affairs. Our own constitution says that even that delegated role that we have given Parliament does not remove that responsibility from us, that we still have a responsibility to act and to debate these things in the public domain.
But when you
We
say
might
when
not
it goes to Parliament, it kills it. That's
Absolutely,
serious. That's such a huge
that is
institution
what
to then
that's
put
what
it
I'm telling
down.
you. That's what I'm telling you. We have had experience in this country because they know the nature of the Parliament that we have now. And I will repeat, it's a Jubilee Parliament. They know when you send issues to that Parliament, nothing happens. Those are the same MPs, and we have, come to realize that we cannot really depend on them to unearth anything. This is the same Parliament which passed the same regulations that allowed the depositing of the Eurobond outside the consolidated fund, and they come out one day and say they did not know. Are these the people that we are sending these reports to?
But your people
90% of
also
the time.
sit in these committees.
Absolutely.
Why don't we hear them come out and say, we just want to make the record clear that we,
But
in the
Sophia, do
opposition...
you know how decisions in a committee are made? Decisions in a committee, just like in the House, are made on a majority, which they have majority in all
But
all
Yeah,
those
but
committees.
that doesn't stop
It's the
them from
truth.
coming to say that, by the way, we
Yeah,
do not
let me
agree
give you
with
an
this.
example. What happened with the vote on the president's memorandum recently? What happened? We have a Speaker of the House who sets a limit and says we need 2/3 majority to be able to, overturn this particular memorandum by the president. The opposition lawmakers show up there, they are unable to raise a number, so they walk out and the memorandum passes.
And Kenyans know their
That's what I'm
position.
telling you.
And
Yeah,
they
but
didn't break-
So
what,
doing.
what is that position? So after you've known, what has happened to you? What has happened to you? The
Alright.
taxes have gone up on things
Sifuna,
as simple as
Sifuna
juice.
is playing politics
No,
here.
it's not politics.
Sifuna is playing
Because-
politics here.
Okay,
Let me
let's
explain what I
have
mean. First and foremost, when the Eurobond conversation was going on, we did not hear a single member of Parliament. Forget about the close to 100 and something that ODM has in that Parliament. Say there was something wrong with how that Eurobond was being structured.
Actually, we
For
did.
them to then come now and say, you see, when you pick up this bond, we are talking about something that happened a year ago, and it is important for us to say, because he actually lied. That money did not stay in an international bank, in a national bank for a year, which is exactly what he's just said just now.
Can I repeat that?
Because
Let me
we did
clarify
that. No,
Just
but
give me a
before you
second.
clarify, I want to say
lie is a
the
very
problem.
strong charge.
But that's exactly what you did, because you said that money stayed in an international bank for a year, which is not true.
It
I
was-
mean, when it's not
Can I-
true, it's a
can I-
lie. I mean, or what
can I
does it
clarify?
become?
Okay, clarify, and then we listen to what Raila Odinga had to say and Aiden Duale as well.
The money was in JP Morgan's account, and they paid the first syndicated loan $600 million. last year because there was pressure. They had actually had to renegotiate it and push it a bit later into the year. Then over 12 different payments that in fact the what's his name?
Control of budget.
Yeah, describe those different payments at different period. Over 25 billion, I think, was the first one. 35 billion, the second one. They made different payments over different periods over a very long time. In fact, it was the whole argument surrounding why 174 billion shillings only acquired 14 million shillings as interest. Because for the first 3 months, it was sitting in the bank. If you do the calculation, it comes to 0.0000 something in interest. But I think there's a bigger question over here. And the bigger question is whether there's sound management of the economy.
Yeah.
And what we're seeing now is that there is a problem. Of the 4 types of crisis, public debt crisis, banking crisis, currency crisis, we actually are on the threshold of most of them. We're in the early stages of a public debt crisis. Ngujiri cannot sit here and try and share the blame for that. The opposition does not run treasury. It does not run the economy.
I'm not trying to share the blame.
Be calm. It does not run treasury. It does not
clarify things
we
as you go
We don't
along.
make the payments. We don't make the policy decisions.
So for you, from where you sit, it's poor management.
It's more than that. There's poor management and there's pilferage.
Okay, and corruption as well. We'll get to that shortly. Our time is running out. I want us to listen to 2 clips back to back, if we may. Director Raila Odinga had something to say on the state of the nation, and also Aden Duale.
Since the Jubilee came to power, it has insisted that the economy is growing and that Kenyans can sit back and relax. Sit back and relax. We in the opposition have warned that we are on the road to nowhere. We warn that the Jubilee is over-borrowing, overspending, and over-stealing. And vomiting in our shoes. We have warned that the cost of living is rising, and Jubilee economics is testing our patience. We raised alarm that the Jubilee government had increased our public debt by 860 billion Kenya shillings in 1 year, from 1.8 trillion to 2.6 trillion. This was an increase of 50%, the largest annual increase in our history. The truth is that our economy is underperforming. All of the 10 African countries whose economies are among the 20 fastest in the world are growing at 7% plus. And they include Liberia, growing at 10.4%, Niger, 8.0%, Cote d'Ivoire, which had just come from civil wars, 7.9%, Ethiopia, 7.5%, Ghana, 7.3%, Mozambique, 7.2%, Tanzania, 7.2%, Rwanda, 7.1%, Zambia, 7.1%, Uganda, 6.2%, and Kenya, 5.2%. So where somebody gets the idea that we are the fastest growing economy in the world, I don't know.
Kenya's growth is robust and is well above the sub-Saharan African average. Kenyan inflation rate is at 6%, according to that report, which remains below the average inflation rate for sub-Saharan Africa, which is 6.3%. We would like Mr. Odinga to quote the source of their imaginary statistics, because we have done ours.
All right, you've heard from CORD leader there and what he thought of the state of the economy and the coalition of reforms and democracy in general, and the leader of majority in the National Assembly. Gentlemen, I want us to run through some of the 3 things that became very, there were the catchy lines in most stories and headlines: the overborrowing, overspending, and overstealing. And I'll start with you briefly. Do you think we're overborrowing?
In terms of what we call the size of the budget that we are running, the borrowing is not that high. That time means we are sitting on 53%. We have a window of 7% to go to 60, which is what we call the 5-year projection. Is the money being used correctly? That to me is where the question is sitting. Yeah.
It's sitting there because you feel why it's not being used correctly?
The fiscal discipline side has a great way to go. We are still far away.
Break it down.
Break it down means the way we are budgeting in terms of pricing of products, the way we are negotiating in terms of who will do which project, and then the competition between national government and county government in terms of which project is done by who. So if you come to water dams, we have the 25 billion which MPs put at the devolution ministry instead of allowing what I would call a process of county negotiation to identify where those dams should be. So procurement, to me, is where we need to fix the issue. The appetite of wanting to control a big budget at the CS level is the second thing we also need to fix. And then finally is technically the openness of these budgets. I was training the chairs of all the parliamentary committees, and I was telling them, if you remove the noise of you are in national and the others are in county, if you took Kenya as Kenya, you as MP should be insisting for every loan, for every budget line, which part belongs to my county. So we should be having a quorum called total, and then spread in all the 290 constituencies. Then that list should be put in the public domain in the constituencies. That way we'll start helping the MPs and the executive as citizens to say this has not been done.
All right, so we're not overborrowing, but fiscal discipline could work and help us going forward. Edwin, your thoughts? I bet you agree with the overborrowing, overstealing, and over
when people use terms like fiscal discipline, what they don't want to say is that it is theft. It is theft on a scale that has never been seen before in this country.
Yes.
It is grand theft. It is pilferage. Because when you see the stories that are coming out of the devolution ministry, for instance, it is absolutely ridiculous. We have the same problem as the national government. We have the same problem as the county government. We have managed as the administration that is in power to absolutely render the instruments or the institutions that are supposed to fight corruption in this country basically impotent, and they are unable to do anything. So let's not hide behind lofty terms. Let's just call it what it is. It is theft. I was being told that, in those communities that practice cattle rustling, you don't come and steal everything because it's an enterprise that you need to support. You still have to come back tomorrow. But what we are seeing is they come and they carry absolutely everything away. It has never happened before.
So we're seeing a lot of corruption, Ngunjiri. There isn't much corruption? You disagree?
You asked
with
a question.
Okay.
Are we overborrowing? Reddy has just explained. No, we are not. Are we overspending in relation to what?
Is
Again,
the focus
that's, you see,
on
that's a question.
capital-intensive
Context.
projects?
But that's how you grow a country. You grow a country. No, you grow a country by capital intensive projects.
But do you do too many at the same time instead of perhaps focus on one or two?
Let me tell you something that happened that we have all pretended we forgot. When Kibaki got into government in 2003, we didn't have a lot of the infrastructure developments that we have today, that we keep priding ourselves, from especially the road infrastructure. By half of it, by the time he was finishing his first term, none of those roads was even half being finished. This conversation we're having 2.5 years after Jubilee got into power, had you had the same conversation when Kibaki got into power, you'd be saying worse things about the kind of plans that he had. But by the time he finished his 10-year cycle, we were all saying, wow, this is an amazing government. Look at the kind of infrastructure they have done. No major infrastructure is done in 2.5 years. Again, the context that we are lacking in the conversations we're having, that every major infrastructural development project we're doing now, which is what these guys are calling overspending, is going to take a while to actually get finished. But when it is finished, we are all going to be out there saying, in fact, that thing started when I was in government, which is what we keep hearing opposition saying today. So it's important. Are we overborrowing? No, we are not. Are we overspending? No, we are not. Are we overstealing? What is that? What is overstealing?
Corruption.
I mean, come on, let's be honest. Either you're stealing, no, let me finish. Either you're stealing or you're not stealing.
Okay,
what we have is that we have a situation in this country, we have a completely bad mentality about how we relate with government. And this is not a national government, this is not a Jubilee problem. We
but
have seen,
concerns.
let me explain. When this government got into power, Some of the first problems we had were when governors, and a lot of governors from cold areas especially, started buying houses. And you'd hear a house has been bought for 300 million shillings. And you'd be like, how? You'd look at the house that has been bought. So the whole idea of stealing, CORD is trying to pinpoint this, and it's sexy, it's attractive, it makes news.
Actually, it's not.
So you're saying stealing is across the board?
It's not even across the board. It is a habit that has developed in how people have related with government over the years. However, let me also explain something else. Because even when we
need to hear
let me finish. As we go forward, we need to remember that even when Raila was the prime minister, even in his own ministry, we had people stealing stuff. However, we never actually led that thread to get him to be the one who takes responsibility. We got after everybody. In the judiciary itself, we had people who are accused of overpricing stuff. We went after them. So even as we go into situations of...
We are going to a devolution shortly, but I'll come to you, Nyangasi, because as he says, there's no overspending. There are those, for example, concerned about energy. It's one of the key areas with the Jubilee government. So when we're talking about, yes, increasing the capacity, but then even beyond what we can absorb as a country so as to export, isn't that a problem?
Yeah, that goes to something we call project selection. And there's been a problem with the project selection. And when you talk about project selection, each project has its own project economics. For instance, with energy, we had an installed capacity of about 1,600 megawatts when Jubilee came into power. And they want to achieve 5,000 megawatts, I think, by 2017. Now, the problem is the kind of spending. I think initially they allocated 60 billion shillings. Does the output from this area warrant that kind of spending? Because most experts have analyzed that we have about 3,500 megawatt capacity by 2019. So these guys are overspending, and they're even talking about exporting to Zambia and Rwanda. So why are you investing so much money to export energy to Zambia and Rwanda? It doesn't make sense. Secondly, I want to go to the overborrowing issue. I think there's a failure to understand how public debt works. And I've had my friend here quote about 53%, the debt to GDP ratio of 53%, we have a 7% margin. I've even had some people talk about 74% as being acceptable globally. But there are a lot of other factors that go into a sound debt management. You can even have a 20% debt to GDP ratio, but the nature of the debt and the structure of the debt is what is important. In economic theory, there's something called an inverted yield curve. Now, the problem with Treasury, it means the short-term paper has higher yields than the long-term paper, which means there's pressure for Treasury to raise money right now. The first quarter will give you an example of how the government is spending, because it spent 136 billion shillings on paying debt, and 112 billion shillings on recurrent expenditure, and 25 billion shillings on development. It shows where the budget, the majority of the money is going. Now, on whether we are overborrowing, when these guys came into the administration, between 2.5 years, they've moved from a 1.8 trillion shilling debt to a 2.9 trillion shilling debt, and it's about to hit 3 trillion shillings. We're actually talking about a 1.1 trillion shilling debt expansion. And the question is, that debt expansion, 860 billion of it has happened over 1 year because of the standard gauge railway. So when they ask us whether we are overborrowing, you clearly, from how the economic indicators, your difficulty in paying staff, your difficulty in keeping the lights in parliament on, show that you have a problem with your expenditure. And you can, so to pretend to sit here and start telling us that everything is fine and everything's fine, and if it's not fine, it's Raila's fault, it doesn't make sense. That's not logic.
Karidi, what do you have to say to that briefly?
First, I would want us to remove personalities, to be very honest. I think we are missing too many things by bringing personalities. The fundamentals, and I'm glad my brother has mentioned, within the increase of 1 trillion, 327 is to one item, which is the standard gauge, which every Kenyan is aware. The debate should now be, and this is what I've been trying to help ourselves to agree, because this figure is out there, we have agreed we are doing it, it's borrowed already. Where are the linkages to be made as a use now of the railway line? Which production is happening in terms of farming so that we have return road on the railway wagon? When it reaches Naivasha, where is that produce to take back to Mombasa for export? So that the debate now is on to repay the investment, what do we need to be doing? So that when the railway line is finished, it then has work to do.
I think
Okay,
that
this
is
will
very
come
important.
now.
If I
You
can
know,
deal with
assuming
that.
it was part of the project analysis, but I'm talking of on the ground.
Okay.
That's what I would want the MPs now to start engaging us as a community.
Okay.
The second thing, which we need to be very clear, and let's not lose the focus here.
Yes.
A lot of what you think is happening was KEPSA driven. Between when the Prime Minister, as a Prime Minister, sat in the round table with the KEPSA, the commitment of standard gauge railway was given. Now, we then went all the way, and unfortunately it rolled into the current system. Within the port, the decongesting the port, allowing it to happen. I'm now talking of the second borrowing, which is the Dondukudu Road, which is happening in Mombasa. Then we have the energy now, which my brother has mentioned. We already have the geothermal increased to 240. Now, the KEPSA now is dealing with the quality of that electricity. But inside the economy, and this is what I'm saying, if you read every commentary, you won't hear Kenya Association Manufacturer or KEPSA making noise. Because these are now participation through private sector driven requests. The economy is being made to allow the economy to produce a competitive advantage.
Okay.
And that's why I said, with a lot of borrowing from my brother's word, the word that we have a pricing project should now be the debate I want us to discuss.
Okay, and let's go there because I have about 10 minutes to go briefly.
I really
30
need
seconds.
to deal with the standard gauge railway issue. This is probably the largest white elephant in Kenya's history. He's talking about the feasibility analysis and the technical review. There was a World Bank report that analyzed out of 4 options. It came up with the conclusion that there's no justification for standard gauge railway at this time in the East African economy. And if you make the argument that is it a valid expenditure of, I think it's about 400 billion shillings now, if you analyze the 2 objectives when you're building a railway, increased speed and increased tonnage. If you analyze right now, we're carrying 900,000 tons.
So there's no justification for it. He says it's not even something that started with this administration. It started before in the Grand Coalition. So what are we saying?
But when it came to the borrowing and the implementation, they did it. When negotiating the contracts, they did it. Tanzania is now doing Tazara for 2,500 kilometers at $6 billion. Ethiopia did 320 kilometers at 320 billion shillings. And it's more hilly and more, all the justifications they give for Kenya building a 400 billion or a $3 billion railway does not make sense at all.
Let's go to inflated costs now, and matter of the devolution ministry and Anne Waiguru coming out yesterday to say this has become a personalized attack. We'll talk about procurement and all, but I saw you run, you're part of a hashtag on Twitter. Is it becoming too personal? Are we forgetting the issues and going after the individuals?
Well, you see, I will give you the example of what happened in Romania early this week. The Prime Minister of Romania resigned because there was a fire at a disco. If you ask that Prime Minister, he doesn't even probably, he has never gone to that disco.
And
he's not the one who
authorized.
authorized.
Just
Absolutely.
Corruption as well.
It is because of the corrupt officials who licensed that particular pub, and he has taken responsibility.
And he was
He's
facing a personal corruption
no,
charge.
No,
It
no,
wasn't just that.
What is
nightclub,
it?
if you follow
You know,
the
there is
story.
something called concession. No, just let me just give you.
I'm just putting into context
Yes.
why he resigned.
That's what I'm telling you. There is something in law we call causation. What is it that happened to force him out? Had that fire not happened, would he still be Prime Minister today? Okay. That's what I'm telling you. So we want to develop a culture of responsibility. When Michuki was the CS for transport, I remember, he used to go even to the bus terminal to inspect the seat belts himself. People are taking responsibility for the things that happen under their ministries. There is a cabinet policy paper that is dated 2nd December 2014, which put procurement right at the desk of the CS, of the CSs in government. So for you to stand up and say, oh, I don't even know what the pen in my office cost, or the TV that is such a humongous thing is so prominent, like this TV behind you, it's difficult to ignore. Can't you say, oh, this is a beautiful TV, how much did it cost us in the...
So you're saying the buck stops with her?
The buck stops with her.
All right. Ngunjiri.
I completely have no idea how to respond to this very personal attack that the opposition seems to have been running against the CS for devolution for 6 months. It's actually ran for 6 months. It's never happened before.
But that's how long corruption has been running.
No, come on.
in
Corruption has been
devolution.
running. Are you saying corruption started 6 months ago?
I'm telling you.
No. The point I need to
Consistently.
make. The point I need to make is this. First and
When did you
foremost,
take a break?
By the way, we just want 1 week.
No.
We just want 1 week where
me
there
tell
is
you.
no corruption out of the
Let me
devolution
tell you,
list.
let me
Just
tell you
1
what
week.
happens. We have a very clear explanation. For example, there's been an argument about other CSs being asked to step aside, and we were not being asked to step aside. And the deputy president was very categorical in explaining that other CSs were mentioned by name and linked by the EACC to a particular issue. It has never happened with Waiguru. What we have is a situation where there's been an escalation, and I used the example of the judiciary as a very. For me it was a very deliberate example of a place where corruption was raised, where the Chief Justice himself has talked about corruption in his arm of government many times, and particular people in the judiciary, from the accounting officer and accountants and what have been asked to step aside, and they're going through a court process. We've never had anybody saying that the Chief Justice should step aside because of that particular problem, and this is why I personally have reached a point. I don't. Despite whether there are any truths or not to the situation going on with the CS, it's become such a politicized attack on her that you now can't even tell whether it is actually true or they are just upset with Waiguru. And let me explain why I think they're upset with the CS. In the previous government, there was a ministry called local government. And when the coalition government was negotiating, they insisted they needed that particular ministry, which went to Mudavadi. Why? Because the local government is what holds the masses. Now, the CS today runs the Ministry of Devolution. You have a structure like that, because this is the minister that is dealing with the whole element of devolution. By default, it makes it a very powerful ministry as far as impacting the general monarchy is concerned. Now, this is a one ministry. If you can undermine in the Jubilee government, you actually undermine
How
the
much
Jubilee
money
government.
has
Let me
devolution
explain.
lost?
And
How much money?
But
By
how much money does it
Waiguru's
have?
own admission.
No.
By Waiguru's own admission, how much money has been lost in the Ministry of Devolution?
791 million.
Okay, which is the next?
It has
ministry?
been given. It
Which
has
is
been
the
given.
next ministry?
All right,
We're not competing.
let's have a
We're not
quick-
competing.
That
We're
is
not
the reason
competing.
why there is a
No,
focus on
no,
her.
no.
It
We're
has
not
nothing to do
competing.
with her.
No, it has everything to do with her. Waiguru has deliberately, directly impacted a lot of narratives that CORD has managed to maintain over the years. And this is from a political perspective. And one of the things that we must keep distinguishing between Edwin and myself and these two gentlemen is that we're looking at these things from very different perspectives. Waiguru has directly affected a lot of CORD narratives that have been maintained over the years. If she's allowed to continue doing what she's doing, by the time we get to 2017, a lot of the narratives about service delivery in parts of this country that has CORD strongholds will have been turned around. She cannot be allowed. It is the one thing that CORD will not allow to happen. The second question that we need to be asking, because I've heard even Jubilee members of parliament now have started saying, yeah, well, it's reached a point she needs to go. The next question is, after they are done with Waiguru, who are they going to go after? Because this is a strategic political effort. We are seeing.
Sound like a hobby.
It is.
All right, Nyangasi.
They wake up and that's all they think about.
If you noticed, he hasn't dealt with the issues. He's dealt with the politics.
Yeah, that's what I do.
So
deal with the issue.
That's why I'm here.
on March 26th, the president went to parliament and he gave us a long, lovely speech in fantastic prose, and he gave us a list, and he gave us 175 names, and he said, these are the people that are spoiling my government, and I want these people investigated. Some of these people have to step out of office. So by the very own standard that the president set, this is not a CORD.
Hasn't he just said those ones were linked directly?
Yes.
She hasn't, so respond to that.
Do you remember the contents of that list?
Yeah.
Linked directly by whom?
By the Eastern,
Those processes
by the
happen in
anti-corruption
court,
authority.
No. Have you read the list?
I did.
And
I
the
have the
allegations
list.
I
against
did.
those people?
I have
Do
read
you
the
remember,
list.
do you recall the allegation that was made against a gentleman at KCC? He was overheard saying something that he would not do.
Yeah.
He was part of that
We're
list.
talking
He
about
was
the
overheard.
cabinet secretaries.
Yeah, that's what I'm
himself.
telling you. That's what I'm
It was
telling you.
directly
That's what I'm
linked
telling you. That is
to each
hearsay.
person.
You will never convict
So
on
yeah,
such
so he's in court.
nonsense.
He's going to
All
defend
right,
his
not
own.
gentlemen,
even there. He's not even in
Nyangasi
court.
has the floor.
Yeah. So by the very own standard the president set, there is a double standard. And when the Code Coalition came out, I think earlier in the year, and said that there's a problem in this ministry, and I think we're even here on the show in Gujiri, and he came and said, "There's no problem. There's no problem. This is just,
I didn't say that.
This is just guys. This is just guys fighting Waiguru and what." But 2 months later, there's a whole scandal about 791 million shillings, and then she calls herself the whistleblower. But the problem, we blew the whistle before Anne Waiguru blew the whistle. It's clearly, it's clear now to deal with the politics about whether Anne Waiguru is this fantastic, extraordinary human being who's driving a devolution ministry, which we consider a ridiculous concept, that to 2017, there's already a widespread failure on Waiguru's implementation process.
So you're saying
NYS
if she
officers,
steps aside, the mess there will be sorted?
Let me finish this. NYS officers are not being paid throughout the country. I mean, the projects that they did start in Kibera and, you know, the posho mills and all. Go there and talk to people on the ground. There's even an internal report showing how they are failed. So the question as to whether she'll be a disproportionately successful minister has already been settled, because there's already failure.
What about Huduma centers?
So,
which also fall under her department,
how much
which have gotten awards, which have gotten international awards.
So your point is, gentlemen, your point
is... My point is that the president has set a standard, and we're in a very difficult time as a country. We're losing a lot of money. I mean, there's an Auditor General report every day that comes out with...
So he should sack her, or she should step aside?
It's up to him whether he's going to sack her or not. But if I was a Waiguru, I'd do the honorable thing and follow my sword.
All right. Let's hear from Karidi, because I know you do not want this about personalities, but it has largely, many have said, become about personalities. But in the question of what she said yesterday, that I'm not involved in procurement, go ask my PS. He's talking about the December 2nd decision to expand that mandate of CS to be able to have some say in procurement. Is that the case?
I would say the trying to remove yourself from what is technically your ministry is professionally not correct. What I would recommend is that she should be telling Kenyans that I'm asking my PS to step aside, assuming you have established that is the actual point. The process of investigation is going to start with the foreign people not being inside. What I would want to suggest is that the pilferage of funds should be an issue Kenyans should be annoyed with. I don't think we should be sitting here to call it a different name. But the professional part of that report, which is, I think, where I like the way the parliamentary committee this time did, because it is out of their question that the list indirectly was released to Kenyans.
Mistaken.
Yeah, Kenyans would not have known what we seem to know. I would then urge the parliamentary committee, because it's work in progress, to finally table their report with the official recommendation on which particular state officer is going to take responsibility out of the items which have been listed. And also remind Kenyans that when we did this constitution, those of us who are behind the scene involved heavily, one of the things we needed done correctly is to create a people with values. So the whole spirit of Article 73 in terms of servant leadership is still a gap that we need to bring to the table. And I was just whispering to my brother, this area the lawyers can start retraining all these people to understand some of these simple but core meanings. Who is a servant leader?
Okay.
The second one, which to me is very fundamental, within the spirit of Article 2296, the Auditor General is supposed to give an audit report for value for money. I have talked to a lot of MPs, a lot of governors, and insisted, where are the value for money audit reports for you to debate? Because this is where now the word value for money comes in.
And you mentioned lawyers as we went up 30 seconds. You've not had the LSK talk about this. We've had other organizations, the churches, all come out. Well, he's on an Okoa LSK note. So
they are not acquiring prices.
So talk to us about what's going on there. Briefly,
it is good that he brought up the issue of servant leadership, and we as the membership of the society have decided that we are the ones who are going to set the bar on what we understand by servant leadership. There is a very serious reason why the current leadership of the society, the council and the outgoing chairman have not said anything on these issues, because they themselves are facing questions that they
Similar.
are unable to answer.
Yeah.
And that is why it would be very hypocritical for them to stand up and point fingers, yet they themselves have been accused of issues to do with financial impropriety and lack of transparency and lack of servant leadership. Because at the end of the day, Kenyans need to understand that we elect people to serve us. Those parliamentarians, when they go there, they're not supposed to be doing their own bidding. They're supposed to be working for us.
Right.
And we have seen it in all areas of leadership, but we are saying, as lawyers, we're going to set a certain standard and say, if you're not going to be elected to do the bidding of the electorate, you're not going to be there.
Okay, 30 seconds.
And just a quick one. The MPs need also to move from code jubilee when it comes to what I would call embezzlement of funds.
Okay.
It should be a house position.
A house position. 30 seconds.
Mine will be very specific. We have and I want to stay within the Anwaigoro story. The person who is leading the impeachment process or the impeachment effort against Anwaigoro is Alfred Keter, who a couple of months ago was in trouble himself.
I thought
on
we
corruption.
said we leave personal.
No, I have to talk about. We didn't agree.
Please.
Yes, I needed to make that point to just show the hypocrisy and the irony of our country. That people are now all of a sudden very happy with what Alfred Keter is doing. We have never finished
because we
his
don't
case.
care about the messenger.
But
Edwin,
no, but this is but you just talked about hypocrisy in your own LSK, that your own leaders who have questions are not able to deal with it. How is it that
all right, please, would you finish? 10 seconds
the
now.
point I needed to make is that we need to be genuine in the conversations we're having, especially about corruption. Even the church said, let us not make the fight against corruption a witch hunt, because then we're not going to go anywhere.
Okay. All right. Finally, final word from you.
Final word. Mine is on the public debt crisis that we're going through. I think there are a lot of policy opportunities. The problem right now is that maybe the administration is struggling to find out policy solutions on how to move forward. I think there are a lot of things they could do right now immediately, and they should outlay a plan on how they're going to solve that problem. A couple of solutions would be, they need to, I hear there are over 10,000 government accounts in different places. They need to consolidate and put all that in a single account.
Okay.
Okay, sorry, it's fine.
I know.
That has happened already. That has happened.
It has happened.
That has happened. Okay, so at least you've gotten a response to that one. But Dr. Paul Nyangasi, who's a consultant of the Coalition for Reforms and Democracy, also Ngunjiri Wambogo, who's a political commentator, Edwin Sifuna, who's a lawyer and part of Okoye LSK. Also with us this morning was Karithi Murimi, an economic commentator. Thank you, gentlemen, for being with us at Situation. All the stories we've talked about this morning will continue to follow here on KTN, so you definitely want to continue to stay with us, and thank you for your feedback. Unfortunately, no time to go through some of your thoughts, but thank you for watching Morning Express. That's where we wrap it up. Stay with us, because in just about a minute or so, I'll be back with News Hour, where we're telling you the stories that are making headlines here at home and beyond.